Kentucky Ranger opens his door during a tornado warning and finds 350 pounds of African lioness collapsing at his feet, bleeding out from a breech birth. But calling 911 means a death sentence for her and the cubs. What he does next will make your heart stop. Before we dive in, where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these incredible stories travel. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we bring you the most unbelievable true animal rescue stories every single week. Now, let's get into the story. The air in the holler had turned that sick shade of green, the color that made old-timers shut their shutters and pray. Jonas McCready had seen it once before, back in '08, right before an EF3 ripped through Harlan County like God's own chainsaw. Now, standing on the porch of his ranger cabin deep in the Daniel Boone National Forest, he watched the pine trees bend sideways, their tops whipping in a frenzy that made his stomach clench. The emergency radio on his belt crackled to life. Tornado warning in effect for Bell, Harlan, and Leslie counties until 2 a.m. Seek shelter immediately. Jonas turned back inside, his boots heavy on the weathered planks. He'd already secured the shutters, moved his truck behind the ridge, filled the bathtub with water. 20 years as a combat medic had taught him to prepare for the worst. 5 years as a ranger in these mountains had taught him that the worst always found you anyway. He was reaching for the lantern. The power would go any minute when he heard it. Thud. Not wind. Not a branch. Something solid. Something alive hitting his door with the weight of desperation. Jonas's hand moved to the shotgun mounted above the fireplace. Could be a black bear spooked by the storm. Could be one of the meth cooks from over the ridge, looking for shelter or worse. His fingers wrapped around the cold metal just as it came again. Thud, thud, then a sound that froze his blood. A high-pitched whine, almost childlike, cutting through the roar of the wind. Not human, not bear, something else entirely. He moved to the window, pulled back the canvas curtain inch, saw nothing but darkness and sideways rain. His heart hammered as he made his way to the door, shotgun raised. Back away from the door, he shouted. I'm armed. The whining grew louder, more frantic. Then came a scraping, claws on wood, dragging down in long, desperate strokes. Jonas flipped the porch light switch. The world stopped making sense. Golden fur, massive shoulders, a face that belonged on the African savanna, not in the Kentucky backwoods. The lioness stared at him through the window, and her eyes, God, her eyes were almost human in their pleading. They held a mother's sorrow, a mother's terror, asking him in a language older than words, please, help me. She wasn't crouched to attack. She was pawing weakly at the door like a house cat, her body swaying. Jonas saw it then, the grotesquely swollen belly, the dark blood matting her hindquarters, running down her legs in rivulets that mixed with the rain. Their eyes met through the glass for one impossible moment. Then hers rolled back white. The lioness collapsed across his threshold with a sound like a falling tree, her flanks heaving, her breathing shallow and wet. Blood pooled beneath her, spreading toward the door frame. Jonas stood frozen, shotgun trembling in his hands, his mind screaming one word over and over. Impossible. But dying was never impossible, and the thing blocking his door was doing exactly that. Jonas's hand moved toward his radio. One call. That's all it would take. State troopers would be here in 30 minutes with AR-15s and a dangerous animal protocol that ended only one way, with a body bag and a news crew. He looked at the lioness. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid gasps. Her eyes had opened again, tracking him with an awareness that made his skin prickle. Those eyes begged him with a clarity that transcended species. "Don't let my babies die. God help me," Jonas muttered and lowered the shotgun. He wedged the door open and grabbed the lioness by her front legs. 350 pounds of apex predator, reduced to dead weight. He pulled, his boots sliding on the wet floor, his back screaming. She smelled like rain and wild musk and something else, fear. The same metallic tang he'd smelled on dying soldiers in Kandahar. Inside, finally, he slammed the door as the wind tried to rip it from his hands. That's when he saw the collar, a thick leather band embedded into the fur around her neck, grown so tight it had rubbed the skin raw beneath. Someone had owned her. Someone had kept a lion like a Labrador until she got too big, too expensive, too real. "Easy, girl," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "Easy now." Her body convulsed. A guttural moan escaped her throat, the sound of a mother in agony. Jonas had delivered babies in field hospitals under mortar fire, but never like this. He moved to her hindquarters and felt his stomach drop. Breech birth. Feet first. No, 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 Evereth. The cub was stuck. The lioness was too weak to push. Without help, they'd both die. His combat medic training took over, pushing aside the absurdity. He checked her airway first, reached into that massive mouth, past teeth that could crush his skull, and cleared the mucus from her throat. She didn't bite. She just watched him with those impossibly human eyes, trusting him with a faith that made his chest ache. Jonas positioned himself behind her. "Okay, Duchess," he said, naming her in that moment. "We're doing this together." He reached in as the next contraction hit. Duchess let out a roar that rattled the windows, then snapped back at him, catching his forearm. Her teeth pierced skin. Jonas froze. They locked eyes. Predator and prey. Life and death balanced on a razor's edge. Then she released him, slowly, deliberately, and licked the wound she'd made with a sandpaper tongue. Her expression almost apologetic. Almost sorry. "It's okay," Jonas whispered, blood running down his arm. "I know it hurts." He worked quickly, found the cub's legs, pulled with the next contraction. The first cub slid free in a rush of fluid, a tiny, mewling thing that Duchess immediately began to clean. Minutes later, the second cub emerged. Outside, the tornado screamed past. Inside, the only sound was the soft, rhythmic nursing of new life. Jonas sat back against the wall, trembling, and watched a lioness nurture her babies on his cabin floor. Then his radio crackled to life. "All units, be advised. Exotic animal escape reported from private facility. Subject is a pregnant African lioness, armed and extremely dangerous. Shoot on sight authorization granted." Jonas's blood ran cold. Dawn broke over the Smoky Mountains like a whispered apology. The tornado had moved on, leaving behind a world scrubbed clean and impossibly quiet. Jonas sat at his kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold, watching a 400-pound African lioness sleep on his braided rug. The cubs, no bigger than house cats, were curled against her belly, their tiny flanks rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Duchess occasionally lifted her head, checking on them with a mother's vigilance. Then her gaze would find Jonas. Those amber eyes held something he'd only seen in human faces before: gratitude. The spell shattered at 7:43 a.m. WHUP, WHUP, WHUP. The helicopter came in low and fast, its spotlight cutting through the morning mist like an accusation. Jonas moved to the window. Black and gold, state police. He could see the rifleman in the open door, scanning the tree with thermal optics. His radio erupted. Private exotic animal compound raided last night. Owner arrested on multiple charges. One adult female African lioness unaccounted for. Residents are advised to stay indoors. Animal control has authorization for lethal force. Jonas looked at Duchess. She was watching him with an intelligence that made his throat tighten. She knew. Somehow, impossibly, she understood that the sound in the sky meant death. He made his decision in the space between heartbeats. "They're not taking you," he said quietly. Jonas spent the day turning his cabin into a fortress of secrets. He cleaned every trace of blood from the floorboards, removed the collar from Duchess's neck, evidence of her captivity, and burned it in the wood stove. He fed her venison from his freezer, antibiotics meant for livestock mixed into the meat to fight infection. The crawl space beneath the cabin became her den. Jonas enlarged the opening, lined it with blankets, created a hidden entrance behind the firewood stack. When the search parties came, and they would come, they'd find nothing but a ranger preparing for winter. Duchess allowed him to treat her wounds, to check the cubs, to move her family into their hiding place. She never growled, never bared her teeth. She simply watched him with those heartbreakingly human eyes that seemed to say, "I trust you. Don't make me regret it." 2 days later, as the search helicopters finally moved north, Duchess emerged from the crawlspace at dusk. She was stronger now. The cubs followed on wobbly legs, already growing into their oversized paws. Jonas stood on the porch, watching her gather them with gentle nudges toward the deep woods. The fireflies were just beginning their nightly dance when she stopped. "Turn back." They stared at each other across the clearing. Man and beast, savior and saved, bound by a secret that would follow them both forever. Then Duchess did something that made Jonas's breath catch. She bowed her head, a single deliberate nod, the gesture of an equal acknowledging a debt. She vanished into the Kentucky brush like smoke. Jonas was still staring at the tree when he heard the truck engine. Close, coming up his access road. He turned and felt his stomach ice over. Sheriff's Department. 2 vehicles. And they weren't slowing down. 3 weeks later, the story had become legend. The escaped lioness, if she'd ever existed at all, was now just another piece of Appalachian folklore. Local news had moved on. The sheriff's department closed the case. Most folks figured it was a publicity stunt from that scumbag exotic animal dealer before the feds raided his operation. Jonas let them believe it. He'd faced down the deputies that night with nothing but a clean cabin and a straight face. They'd found nothing, suspected everything, proved nothing. Now he stood on Devil's Backbone, a limestone ridge that ran like a broken spine through the Daniel Boone National Forest, inspecting storm damage. The tornado had carved a path through here, leaving behind shattered pines and exposed rock faces that would take years to heal. His boots crunched on loose shale as he made his way along the narrow trail. To his left, solid ground. To his right, a 40-foot drop into a ravine choked with rhododendron and broken timber. He'd walked this ridge 100 times. The ground betrayed him without warning. The limestone, saturated from 3 weeks of rain, simply gave way beneath his feet. One moment Jonas was standing. The next, he was falling, sliding down the embankment in an avalanche of mud and stone that stripped the skin from his palms as he clawed for purchase. He hit the bottom hard. The sound his leg made, a wet crack like a green branch snapping, was drowned out by his scream. Jonas looked down and immediately wished he hadn't. The bone had punched through the skin just below his knee, white and obscene against the red. Compound fracture, femoral artery intact, He wasn't fountaining blood, so he had time. But not much. His radio. Where was his? He found it 3 feet away, smashed against a boulder. Plastic shards and circuit boards. Useless. Jonas tried to move and nearly blacked out from the pain. He was trapped, immobile. The ravine walls rose around him like the sides of a grave. The sun was already sinking behind a ridge. Temperature would drop to 40 degrees after dark. He was wearing a short-sleeve uniform shirt. No yakit, no emergency kit, no way to call for help. Then he heard it, a sound that made his blood run colder than the coming night. Yip, 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 coyotes. In Kentucky, they didn't hunt alone anymore. They'd learned to form packs, breeding with feral dogs until they were bigger, bolder, and hungry enough to take down deer. Or a man who couldn't run. Jonas saw the first pair of eyes reflecting in the gathering darkness. Then another. Then 4 more. They were circling. He reached for his knife with shaking hands, pulled it from its sheath. 6 inches of steel against a pack of predators. The math wasn't in his favor. The alpha stepped into view, a rangy male with mange scars and teeth bared in what looked disturbingly like a grin. It tested the air, smelling blood, smelling prey. Jonas gripped the knife and prepared to sell his life as expensively as possible. The coyote tensed a spring, and the world exploded with a roar that shook stones loose from the ravine walls. The shadow came from above, a massive shape that dropped 40 feet and landed between Jonas and the pack with barely a sound. Golden fur caught the dying light. Duchess. She didn't attack. Didn't need to. She simply stood there, twice the size of the largest coyote, and opened her mouth. The roar that came out was primordial, a sound that belonged to an older, fiercer world. It rattled through Jonas's chest cavity, shook leaves from the trees, and sent every coyote scrambling into the underbrush like their tails were on fire. Silence fell. Duchess turned to Jonas with those impossibly human eyes, eyes that recognized him, remembered him, loved him. She curled her massive body around his broken form. Jonas felt her furnace heat seeping into his shivering muscles, her sandpaper tongue rasping across his face, keeping him conscious as shock tried to drag him under. She purred, a sound like distant thunder, and rested her chin on his chest. Standing guard, keeping him alive. Good girl, Jonas whispered through chattering teeth. Good girl. He drifted in and out as the night deepened. But Duchess never left. At dawn, the search and rescue team heard something impossible echoing through the holler, the unmistakable roar of an African lion. They found Jonas within the hour. Duchess melted into the tree lean as the paramedics approached, vanishing like a golden ghost. But Jonas saw her watching from the shadows, making sure he was safe before she disappeared. 3 days later, from his hospital bed in Lexington, Jonas made an anonymous call to the Wild Feline Sanctuary of Colorado. He gave them coordinates, told them about a lioness and 2 cubs living in the Daniel Boone backcountry. The rescue team found them within 12 hours. Jonas watched the evening news as they showed footage of Duchess being tranquilized, gently, humanely, and loaded into a specialized transport crate. The cubs tumbled after her, already the size of beagles. The reporter explained they'd be relocated to a 300-acre reserve in the Rockies, where they'd live out their lives in safety. The final shot showed Duchess walking through the gate of her new enclosure, a vast grassland under Colorado sky. She paused at the threshold, lifted her head, and looked directly at the camera. For just a moment, Jonas could swear she was looking at him. He smiled through tears as his finger found a morphine drip button. On the screen, Duchess's cubs bounded past her into their new home, and she followed them with the regal grace of a queen who had finally found her kingdom. Sometimes, Jonas thought as sleep took him, the fiercest beasts carry the gentlest hearts. And sometimes, the greatest love is knowing when to let go. If you believe that compassion knows no species and that the fiercest creatures can carry the gentlest hearts, like and share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe now for more incredible true stories of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and animals. Also, check out the 2 videos showing on the screen right now. They're specially crafted for you.